timeless celebration of life. My name is Jan Lister, and I will be your facilitator today. And our musician today is the wonderful Jean Heinrich. And we're going to start with an opening congregational song. Please rise in body and spirit if you're willing and able. The song is De Colores in Pink Book on page 46. Happiness is for you.
Gracias. That's it. Unless you want to make something first.
Fun song. So appreciate the spring colors coming out now. Okay, so we are a philosophically based spiritual community dedicated to human liberation and based on existentialist and feminist principles. By existentialist principles, we mean that we are what we do in the world, and we accept responsibility for our choices and our actions. By feminist principles, we mean that we accept and actively support freedom and justice for every person. We support diversity as a source of strength, and we actively include everyone. We make our spiritual home in the Old Stone Church, which was hand-built 100 years ago by the African American Antioch East Baptist Church. We honor their labors of love and the powerful history of this very special place. We acknowledge that our spiritual home stands on land forcibly taken from the Mesquite Creek people, and we support justice and equality for all Indigenous people. Okay, this time I'd like to remind you to please put your electronic devices on silent. Feel free to wander around, but please do so quietly and respectfully. Our speaker today is Anthony Knight, a longtime friend of First E, whose topic is 3 words: Ruminations on the Past and Future. Anthony told me that his topic today is about the importance of language, and words in particular, and its impact on one's life. How the words one hears from family members and society can help shape his or her life, work, and interaction with others. And I was intrigued for 2 reasons. One, I have been stung by words before, many times in my life. And 2, I've just always loved words. I love the English language. I majored in journalism, not because I wanted to be a journalist, but because it allowed me to write. And I'm living in Charlotte, like, and I have to say my teachers love me because of my writing. When I was a junior in college, I had to take the Regents exam, and there were 2 sections. One was reading comprehension. I guess everybody's had to take it that ever graduated from college in Georgia. But the comprehension is you read a paragraph and then you answer a couple of questions about it. The second section was writing. You were given 2 questions and had to write an essay based on those 2 questions, or one of those 2 questions. And I think you had an hour to do it. And if you didn't pass the writing section, you could take it again, I think 2 more times, and then you'd have to take the class before you could take it again after that. And you couldn't graduate until you passed it. When I was in college, the pass rate for the writing portion of the exam was about 49%. It has since been changed to provide more help for students. Today the test is taken sooner, so the student has more time to improve. There are also alternate testing programs and more individualized help for those having problems passing it. Needless to say, it can be a real problem to students for which English is a second language. But the pass rate has gotten up to about 85%, so these improvements seem to be working. Anyway, I wrote about my parrot, Baby. I think the question was, what is your most prized possession? A few weeks later, I got a letter from the Board of Regents saying I scored a 4 on the writing section of the test, the highest score available. Only 7 people out of 6,300 scored a 4 that year. So I'm not telling you this because I won't brag. Okay. It was something I I was very proud of, and which, you know, it made me a teacher's pet. My teachers loved that I could write. I remember once I was writing an essay, and I was writing this sentence over and over and over with little changes each time until I wrote what I thought was the perfect sentence, and it really took me about 2 hours. But it was a beautiful sentence, worth every second. I remember reading it over and over and just reveling in its beauty. When you love a certain language, you do that kind of thing. You correct everyone. Sometimes you correct them out loud if you know them well. You cringe every time someone says, "I could care less," instead of "I couldn't care less." Because don't they know I could care less means that they could care less? And even though you know you'll never be able to change it, when someone says forte instead of fort, it makes you a little sad. And don't even get me started on things like, "And now, with further ado," which one of my bosses used to say, and another boss used to say this all the time, drove me crazy. It's a mute point. Or nuclear, or library, or despite, or orientate, or irregardless, or as my ex-husband used to say, supposedly. Or the worst music lyrics of all time, the world in which we live in. I could go on and on. When Zoe, my daughter, was in the 5th grade, she came home with a list of often misspelled words, and the teacher misspelled. Of course, I told Zoe that it was incumbent upon her to point this mistake out to her teacher, and she came home the next day and told me that the teacher got a little huffy with her, and from now on, if I wanted to correct her teacher, I'd have to call her and do it myself. Anyway, as I've gotten older, I've realized that some people are better at some things than others. You can't be too judgy. So you just have to deal with it and admit that you have your own foibles. My ex couldn't spell the word lettuce. He gave me a grocery list once with lettuce on it, L-E-T-U-S. But he was a whiz at math, unlike me. So in the end, it's not really about how you pronounce things or get your sayings mixed up. With words, it's about the meaning. I said earlier that I had been stung by words many times in my life. I didn't say that I had also stung others. I don't think I ever did it deliberately. Mostly, it was just because I wasn't thinking. I'd like to think that I would never deliberately be cruel enough to hurt people with my words. And that's why it's so important to think before you open your mouth. Because words can be cruel, but they can also be kind. Words can change your life, sometimes in a good way, but sadly, too often in a bad way. Here are a few quotes worth thinking about. Words, so powerful, they can crush a heart or heal it. They can shame a soul or liberate it. They can shatter dreams or energize them. They can obstruct connection or invite it. They can create defenses or melt them. We have to use them wisely. That's from Jeff Brown. If we understood the power of our thoughts, we would guard them more closely. If we understood the awesome power of our words, we would prefer silence to almost anything negative. In our thoughts and words, we create our own weaknesses and our own strengths. That was Betty E. Don't mix your words with your mood. You can change your mood, but you can't take back your words. And from Dorothy Neville. I love this one. The real art of conversation is not only to say the right thing at the right place, but to leave unsaid the wrong thing at the tempting moment. Okay. We'd now like to recognize any newcomers that might be with us today. Or have been here. Oh, please stand up and tell us who you are.
Good morning, my name is Bob Jones, and morning. My name is Mark Jones, and we Marlboro invited me to come to school.
Thank you, Art. It's great to have you here. Anybody else? Yes, please stand up.
I'm here from Detroit. I'm a member of the First UU Church in Detroit on the corner of Cass and Forest and visiting, and so came to your church. Thank you for having me.
How did you hear about us?
My friend here, I found you on the website, yeah.
Wow, and have you been here before?
Yeah, so I'm Connie Wells, and I'm here from the Detroit area as well. I go to the Grosse Pointe Unitarian Church, and we just were surfing on the web for Unitarian churches, and we landed here. So thank you for having us.
That's great. I live in Detroit. That's really cool. Thank you so much for coming. You know, if you are new, I'd like to draw your attention to the connection card, which is located inside of the pamphlet. And you can fill out, if you want to, you can tell us more about yourself, or you can request more information about us. And you can also, if you want to, you can opt in to get our bi-weekly, well, I think it's weekly now, e-blast from Robert, or our monthly newsletter. So once completed, you can tear it out and drop it in the collection plate as it goes by. Okay, and this is now the time to celebrate anyone who is present today who may be celebrating a milestone, such as a birthday, an anniversary, some special occasion. Charlene. Yeah. Charlene's birthday. Birthday. All right. Let's sing.
79. 79.
Yeah.
I never would have guessed that in a million years, Charlene. I never would have guessed that in a million years. You're
La
fabulous.
la 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 la. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Rosie. Happy birthday to you.
We don't have any children here, but I just want to just remind everybody that if you need youth programming in the future, that we're asking you to make reservations a week ahead of time. So just be aware of that. And if anyone has any community announcements, please bring them up and I will read them later on in the service. Is Marcia here today? Yeah, there she is. Yay. So at this time, I'd like to ask our fellowship minister, Marcia Michener, to come up and give us some of her words of wisdom.
Don't wait too long on one but it's great to have you here today. Thank you for coming. So, a lot going on in the world. They'll need to please keep your hearts open for those that are in Ukraine and elsewhere throughout the world, where there's a lot of suffering going on for a wide variety of reasons. And this coming Saturday here, we're going to have a wonderful event for Get Out the Vote. And it's important that we keep ourselves informed about what's going on and who is running, and so that we can be able to make an informed choice. And if you have those that you really want to support, whatever way that you can do that, by letter writing, by sending money, by canvassing, whatever it might be, this upcoming election is incredibly, every election is important, but I mean, there's a lot at stake coming up. So I hope that you will do your part, and I hope you'll come out on Saturday. If you would like to come and help to set up. We're going to be setting up at 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Not too early, see, so you don't have to get out of bed early on a Saturday morning. If you would like to help, if you'd let me know, so we can make sure we've got enough folks to help us out, okay? Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. If the words you spoke appeared on your skin, would you still be beautiful? That's from Oscar Allegais. And you don't want to skip a song, so let's do it.
Let's do it now. So
That when you want to talk about something really intimate. That's from C.S. Lewis. From John F. Kennedy. As we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. Words are the model. Words are the tools. Words are the boards. Words are the nails. From Richard Rhodes. And from Truman Capote, to me, the greatest pleasure of writing is not what it's about, but the music the words make.
yeah.
And from Hafiz, the words you speak become the house you live in. I just want to give you a reminder to bring your community announcements to me, and I'll read them after our speaker. And our featured speaker today is Anthony Knight. Yay! I tell you, I just love to listen to Anthony speak. He always has things to say that really make you think. I love his demeanor. He has a way of seeing things from many sides and a way of interpreting things that make you say, oh, okay, I get it now. I love his character. I've never heard him utter a bad word about anything or anybody, but has a way of seeing through things through other people's eyes. Hell, I just love him. If I was 20 years younger, or he was 20 years older, I'd ask him to marry me. That's how much I love him. Anyway, I can't wait to hear what he has to say today. Anthony is the president and CEO of the Baton Foundation, a Georgia nonprofit organization that serves the emotional, intellectual, and cultural needs of Black boys in grades 5 through 9. Before founding the foundation, Mr. Knight worked for 22 years as a museum educator and consultant. He has extensive experience with and interest in African American history and culture, public and living history, informal education, and Black youth. Anthony's work with the Baton Foundation reflects his ongoing interest in the issues and practices related to the collecting, preservation, and interpretation of information about and material culture from the African diaspora. I have Mr. Knight here on my notes, but I can't. I'm just going to call you Anthony. Everybody knows you. Anthony's undergraduate work was in Spanish and English at Ohio Wesleyan University, and his graduate work was in museum education at George Washington University. He also holds a degree in Spanish to English translation from the Núcleo de Estudios, Lingüísticos y Sociales in Caracas, Venezuela. Did I say that right? And he is a New York City native. Please welcome Anthony Knight.
If that was a proposal, Jen, I don't see a ring up here. I'm just saying. Good morning, First Tee. How is everyone today? It's so nice to see you guys in person and not on the computer screen. Oh, well, that's not bad either. I think we've all gotten used to computer screens. If you can bear with me for a minute, I'll pull up my talk. Speaking of technology. So I had no idea, no way of knowing when I selected this title, I was thinking about what you say, that Jan is such a word freak and a language freak. I love it. I mean, because I am too. And she sent me an email saying, "Oh my God, I love this topic. I'm a word freak." So one word completely unrelated to my talk that sticks out, that pops into my mind occasionally from my youth, is livakavit. It's probably a word you've not heard. You probably won't find it in any dictionary, but it was a word my grandmother used all the time, particularly with us kids, and a lot with my sister, because my sister was fresh. And so my grandmother would often say, "Don't be so livakavit." Where that word came from, I have no idea. But we knew exactly what she meant. So today's talk is 3 words: ruminations on the past and a little bit on the future. And I'd like to begin by sharing a quote with you from Senegalese forestry engineer Baba Diom, from a 1968 talk he gave. And maybe you've heard it before. "In the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand. And we will understand only what we are taught." Education, thought, independence. Together, these 3 words form the cornerstone of a childhood foundation laid by my parents and maternal grandparents with great care, commitment, and love. They were said so often that as I became an adult, I cringed when I heard them uttered. Sometimes I still do. I'm sure I've shared these stories before, but they bear repeating, as the 3 words derive their power from them, and they provide some context. My grandparents were born in 1913. My grandmother, Velma Reed, was born in Sanford, Florida, and my grandfather, Solomon Knight, in South Georgia, Quitman specifically. His family moved to Sanford in early 1920. Velma and Solomon lived in the Goldsboro area of Sanford and met as children. They married at 20, and my father was born soon after. My grandmother was given to hyperbole, so when she took a notion to tell tales of her childhood, I never quite knew what was truth. In all her stories, she had a leg up on my grandfather and shone more brightly. You know the African proverb, if the lion doesn't tell his own story, the hunter will. According to her, she completed the 8th grade and my grandfather the 3rd or 4th. Knowing what I know about Sanford, Florida, and the Jim Crow South in general, I suspect that may not be completely true. In fact, I'd be surprised if either one finished any grade level. More likely is that they both had smatterings of education, enough to learn how to read and to write and to figure, to do math. My grandfather often told me the story of how his grandfather, born into slavery in the mid-1850s, always encouraged him to learn how to read and write, and he did. Knowing my grandparents' backstory, so to speak, is an ongoing source of pride. Like so many of their contemporaries and generations of blacks before and after them, they were intelligent beings who, only because of the environment into which they were born, the United States, did they not have the same opportunities as others. Their innate talents, personal desires, and inclinations did not have the same outlets for expression as if they had been born white. However, despite the efforts to suppress their gifts, they triumphed. My grandfather would eventually retire as an assistant manager in a drugstore, and my grandmother created and ran a successful real estate business. Indeed, by the time I was born, the hardships, humiliations, and trials they endured as young adults were long in the past. Not that it had all ended completely, but they had arrived at a station in life that made the challenges perhaps somewhat more bearable. My grandparents understood well the value of a sound education, and for the entirety of their lives, that word rolled off their tongues more times than I can remember. So heavy was its weight, the pursuit of more and more and more education. It almost drove me to exhaustion. What I learned, though, is that no amount of education can erase white supremacy and its impact on one's life. My grandparents, of course, would have no way to know that. My father, Anthony Knight Sr., was born in Sanford, Florida, and lived there during the formative years of his life, first with his parents, and later, when they moved to New York, with his paternal grandparents. He joined his parents in the Big Apple when he was 6 or 7 years old. Unlike his parents, my father attended school as it is familiar to us, elementary school, middle school, and high school. Although by the time he reached high school, he was getting into trouble and running with the wrong Harlem crowd. My grandparents solved that problem by enlisting him in the United States Navy, much to his chagrin. It did not occur to them, indeed, there was nothing in their lived experience to suggest to them that my father might have been bored in school, that perhaps he was a gifted child. My father was an introvert and lived a rich internal life. He was a deep thinker and saw the world in hues of gray, not black and white. I'm a lot like my father, and I'm often saddened by the fact that he grew up surrounded by people who loved him dearly, but who were ill-equipped to help him think beyond his so-called station in life and the just did a good job with good benefits mentality. My father was a visionary and saw opportunities for black people that were not aligned with the workaday attitudes prevalent in the middle-class black neighborhood in which we lived in. Think, my father would exhort my siblings and me, use your damn head. And while the passion, red anger, with which my father often delivered this dictum scared the Jesus out of me, his mandate has made my life rich in ways I could not have imagined as a child. His unfulfilled desire to have time to ruminate and cogitate, as my grad school director often said, informed his determination to make that possible for his children. As a result, I spent untold hours in my bedroom, sitting on the floor, looking up at the fish in my fish tank. I watched as they swam and interacted with each other. I had ample space physically and mentally to explore the reality of living creatures, to listen to music, and to write poetry. I often wonder about the man my father might have become had he enjoyed the same space he provided for me. Think was his word of choice. Growing up, Saturday mornings were the same. Cartoons, breakfast, chores, and in the car. Sometimes to go grocery shopping, sometimes to go clothes shopping, and often to make the 20-minute drive to my paternal grandparents' home on Long Island, and to do shopping out there or to just hang out. And I always preferred the latter. Regardless, my mom always seemed to be irritated by something. My father's ongoing desire to have his own business, Red not wanting to work a regular job, the struggles they faced as a couple because of his entrepreneurial ambitions, Red, my mother having to pay all the bills, or the sheer burden of working a 9-to-5 job, managing a household, and raising 4 children, all of whom were 13 to 16 months apart, the proverbial stair-step. As I look back on my childhood with adult eyes, I often wonder how my mom didn't just check out. Literally, I wonder how she didn't go crazy. I know it was not the life she envisioned for herself. Regardless of the destination, 2 things were certain. One, we children would be serenaded by my mom's exquisite mezzo-soprano voice as she accompanied the random songs that played on the car's AM radio. Although it really frustrated the hell out of me that her voice didn't sound like the contemporary artists we listened to. Silly me for not knowing the difference between real training and, well, something else. And 2, a fire and brimstone sermon about the importance of being independent. My mother, Simone Dewey, was raised in the Bronx by a biracial mother, the daughter of immigrants from Barbados and Dominica, and a Creole father whose family was rooted in New Orleans. She was the oldest of 6 and often, way too often, had the responsibility of helping to raise her siblings and play stand-in wife to her World War II vet father. After the war, my grandfather secured work as a mail carrier, a good job for a man of color in those days. My grandmother was an expert seamstress, and she had steady work at a local cleaners and took in sewing on the side. I often think about how my mom viewed her mother, for even though she had a trade and made money, my grandfather's job provided the lion's share of the family's income and all the benefits. Moreover, my grandmother didn't drive in those early years, so once they moved from the Bronx to Long Island, if she couldn't walk to her destination or get a ride, she was housebound. As a pre-adolescent girl, I can only imagine that these limitations frustrated my mom, who was, by all accounts, a headstrong and precocious child, and that pretty much hasn't changed. It must have infuriated her that her mom wasn't calling more of the shots in her own life. At 19, determined not to help raise another one of her siblings, my mom moved out of her parents' home and moved in briefly with her favorite aunt and uncle. Within months, she found and rented a beautiful Tudor home in Queens. Her intention was to purchase it. What she didn't expect was that she would meet my father. They dated, married, and I was born 2 years later. I imagine that my mom's decision to relinquish the independence she craved for so many years deeply troubled her on some level. For all I know, she loved my dad and us kids. She unwittingly cast aside the love she might have had for her own life. As her family expanded and troubles with my father mounted, I suspect she realized her mistake, even if unconsciously and too late. Her mantra, be independent, was the only way she knew how to instill in us kids a strong sense of the importance of self and to not give that gift over to others. The words we hear as children and the ideas they embody embed themselves deeply within our psyche. Often we do not realize how they influence the decisions we make and how they help and hinder the events of our lives. Over the years, I've seen how the drive to get that top education, as my grandmother would say, meaning a PhD, almost consumed my life, blinding me to the value of the education and experience I already had. Similarly, I've been accused of overthinking things, particularly regarding relationships and my life in general, occasionally not enjoying the moment or the people in my circle. And the quest for independence often leads me down paths alone, not being able to trust the counsel of others or trying to do everything on my own. In and of themselves, these three words, education, thought, and independence, are powerless. These words, though, were spoken by people I loved and adored, people who, as a child, seemed larger than life. In addition, the people speaking those words had lived experiences that imbued them with an energy the words themselves did not possess. I can't say that I regret having had those words play such a prominent role in my life. They've benefited me in ways great and small. I'm glad, though, that I've been able to let the air out of them, to engage with them only insofar as their definitions will allow. For what I've learned is that it's not so much that words have power as it is the people who speak them. And those are my thoughts for today.